Welcome back to Hot Flashes and Cool Topics, everybody. We are really thrilled today to have Kelley on. And Kelley has her PhD, and she is a licensed psychologist with a doctorate from UT Austin. And she also is coming out with a great new book that is secure relating, holding your own in an insecure world, along with Sue Marriott, her partner in life, as well as co author and co host of her podcast, the Therapist Uncensored podcast. So, welcome to the show today, Anne.
Thank you so much, Bridget, for having me on. And
Eh,
Colleen, I'm really excited to be here.
we're thrilled too, and thank you. We had quite a time this morning getting all the technology and the times and everything. And Anne is so patient and understanding. So, really, if you're in the area of Austin, Texas, and you need a good psychologist, I would go to her because she's very understanding. Oh, your book, I was reading it when the turmoil was all on our end, not on Anne's end. Uh, um, I was talking, I said, when I got in touch with you, I said, oh my gosh, I am in the red zone right now, and I need to get back to green. And that is something in your book. You talk a lot about attachment.
Mhm.
Um, I guess we'll start with the attachment part of your book and being secure.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, the book primarily centers on us. The reason we titled it Secure Relating is about finding your most grounded, wise self in moment to moment interactions with people. And it is, it's easier said than done, right? Like we all think, I'm going to stay cool and calm and collected, and I am not going to, stomp up the stairs after my teenager this time. I'm just not, right? And then lo and behold, we find ourselves doing exactly whatever it is we said we weren't going to do, eat that whatever out of the refrigerator. And we can be really, really hard on ourselves, right? And actually, we can be really hard on other people, especially when we say, I've told you 15 times not to do that. You keep doing that. You must not care. You just don't even think about it. And the truth be told, the part of our body that it was developed early in life is what we call our attachment system. It's how we learn to keep ourselves safe. It's how we learn, more importantly, to connect to other people and keep other people around. And it is deeply impacted. Those relationships deeply impact how we're wired. And that's what we mean when we talk about attachment. Attachment can mean so many things out there in the common media, but really it's like, how are we wired to connect? How are we wired to protect ourselves? And we have found that the more you can actually understand your wiring and your early attachment, things that seem chaotic and crazy about what you're doing or what your partner or your child or your boss is doing, all of a sudden a light bulb goes on. You have a way of seeing it more clearly and more compassionately. And more importantly, you have more options to do something different.
You talk about relational neuroscience. Can you talk, first off, I'm not familiar with that term. So can you talk about what relational neuroscience is?
Yes, that's a great question. It is a mouthful, isn't it? We haven't figured out too many other ways to say it, but relational neuroscience is about, as humans, or actually all mammals, it is the reason you call it relational neuroscience is relational is about how we stay in relationship to those around us because it's vital to our survival, right? We have to have others when we come to this world. That's obvious. We're babies. If we don't have other people, we're going to be in trouble. And so it's about how do we keep in relationship with ourselves and our relationship with other people. And we learn from a very early age how to do that. And it impacts our wiring, our neurobiology. There's the neuroscience. How is our body wired? And it shifts. We aren't just born in this world with certain wiring, and we get what we get. We don't throw a fit. That isn't the case, right? It grows. How somebody can attend to you, what kind of emotions are expressed to you, how you are received with your crying as a baby informs your entire nervous system. Hey, does this work? Or does this make people run away from us? And the interesting thing about the neuroscience is as we start to learn, oh, wait, every time I really scream and cry as a toddler, rather than my caregiver coming close and giving me comfort and warming my body, they actually get really elevated and scared, or they get really angry and shut off. And so really our wiring learns, oh, over and over again. It gets stored in the deepest part of our memory that we can't, it's unconscious, but we do learn. So we learn what information to pay attention to, and we learn what information to ignore. We learn how to regulate our emotions by that. And it literally is in our wiring. So when we say relational neuroscience, is how is your body wired? How is your brain wired? And how do we co-regulate each other in relationships? Kind of a long answer, isn't it?
No, but
But
that
it-
makes sense.
It does make sense. And I mean, you use so many great examples in your book about just different relationships between people and how they were raised. And there's also in there, when I was reading it, I'm thinking, oh no, I've screwed up my kids. I'm not, I mean, I'm like, oh, did I do that? Or should I have done that? But there's also hope. There's always
Yes.
hope. So can you talk about some of the things there that if you feel like, oh, I do this one thing or I go red too much, that there is hope for certain situations? Can you share some of those
Oh, absolutely.
hopes?
And I'm
Yeah.
so glad you brought it up, because that's one thing we tried so hard to not do in our book, is to have this sense. And honestly, some of the information about attachment gets out there and it really scares people. Oh my God, I was not attending and I lost my temper so many times with my child. I've screwed everybody up. And that is just so, first of all, not true. We are so human. And honestly, research has shown that we just need to like warmly connect, sometimes only 30% of the time, because it's all about repair. It's not about the initial thing. But going back to the neuroscience, because I'm a little bit of a neuro nerd, our body is learning throughout our lives. It is not true what we learned as a child is the only thing that is going to happen to us. All the way until we are in the grave, our body is rewiring itself and learning new things and shifting and changing. So it's so hopeful. It really, really is. First of all, the fact that anybody out there is listening and reading and like thinking about their child and what they did shows you already are in tuned and caring. And my guess your kids already know that. And that's really what we need to know, is that our kids know we care. And we send so much more good stuff than we do. We remember the bad stuff and we just hold on to it, right? And we think, oh my gosh. And it's so easy to forget all the wonderful, kind moments of hugging them when they hurt themselves, or all the loving moments. And those are all getting wired in, honestly, deeply in their sense of self. But to answer your question, is there's so much hope. How we relate to each other on a day-to-day basis literally can change the way our brain is wired and change the way our caring people in our lives respond. And so it's full of hope.
You said just, and I know you say this in the book, just recognizing that is the first
Yes.
step. And you just said that again, just recognizing, I know what's happening here. I know what's going on
Yeah.
right here, that actually helps. And I mean, just little things to say, I
Yes.
know I know I'm going into this mode right now. I know
It's
I'm
so true.
getting very emotional right now. Can I bring myself back? Which leads to can you talk about the red, the green, and the
Yes.
blue zones? Yes.
Yes, it could have seemed so funny. Why did we all of a sudden throw colors in? Well, you can see, just trying to describe what relational neurobiology is. You either get interested or you get overwhelmed or you tune out, because if you're not really interested in that, it's too much for us to hold. We don't walk around dealing with our partners and thinking about neurobiology, right? So we use colors on a spectrum. And we do that because everyone can imagine a spectrum of color, right? Like there's all these different shades, right? And so we don't go from feeling our deepest, most secure self to all of a sudden being hot and red and angry all at one moment, right? We travel that way. And we travel that way many times without recognizing it. We don't really recognize we had all these shades before we were really angry and raising our voice. Talk a lot about that, or we get cut off. And so we use colors in a spectrum. In our book, you'll see a spectrum to help you track, oh, wait, where am I? Where am I in the moment to moment? Because when we recognize just the fact that we're aware of ourselves in a moment does wonders. Because I don't know about you guys, often, most of us, we feel something, we don't even know what it is, but we feel it, it activates us. And the first thing we do is you look around to see what's causing it, and that's the reason. If you wouldn't have done that, I would have been fine. So then my goal is to change you. If you would quit doing that, then I'm going to feel great. So stop doing it. Right. But the truth of the matter is, if we turn to ourselves first and really ground, when I come to you and say, you did this, or this is upsetting, I'm going to do it in a completely different way and I'm going to be heard. So we use colors, and there's a reason. It's just not random. I'll try to describe this really quickly. We use the center is green. You mentioned green earlier, and that is the center of our spectrum. And the reason we use green is because it's kind of our flow state, right? When we're in green, obviously lights mean you get to go, you're safe. And so it's our flow state, and that's in our most secure place. In the spectrum, if you travel one direction, you travel to further shades of red, and red's where we're hot. We thought of red because you're hot, you're activated, you're sympathetically going at it, right? And in that direction, it's likely that when you were younger, if you lean that direction, so we lean one direction or the other when we get upset more often than not. Some of us lean red, which means we tend to be, when we get upset, we tend to get more emotional. We're very aware of our surroundings. We take in all sorts of information about what's happened out there, and we store it and we react to it. And so that's why it's red. It's a little hot. But when people think about getting upset, we often think about getting angry, but there's another direction on that spectrum. And this is the one I really want to talk about because it gets ignored. And I actually think it gets promoted in our world. And that's going to the other side of the spectrum, which is a description of our nervous system. When we go blue, we start to downregulate. We start to bring our body in a more disconnected way from the relationship. So we get more logical, less emotional, more rational, a little bit more black and white thinking. And we often think when we go blue, we use blue because we're more cool and cut off, that we're right. And rational thinking is the answer. And so the reason I like to talk about that is often as somebody is more emotional in the relationship, they're pegged as being too sensitive, too activated. Just calm down. We would be fine if you just calm down. The problem is your emotion. But the problem really isn't always your emotion, because we are feeling beings and we want to connect. And often when we're in the green and the red, we're really wanting connection. And if we've been raised that our emotions are kind of weak, and unfortunately lots of men have been raised more in that direction, then they don't even recognize that emotions actually threaten. So you're feeling threatened. And so you have all these strategies to cut yourself off from those feelings. And guess what? It's also to cut other people off. So you're often like, you're just being too sensitive. And really what that is we have to teach people that actually, when you're really in the blue, you're in the blue because you're extremely sensitive. You're extremely sensitive. You're picking up these signs that somebody's upset in the world, and you think your job is to fix the problem or shut down the emotion. So often in the blue, you go to giving somebody the answer when they haven't asked for it. You know what I mean? Or you start telling them, we'd be fine if you just stopped being upset. If you'd be happy. Really, our problem in our relationship is you're unhappy. And if you were happy, we'd be great. And what we want people to understand is that's actually probably built on your attachment system and the way you learned to connect, and that you learned to keep emotions contained is safer. And to keep your emotions contained, you have to stop other people from feeling, because if they get upset, you feel you don't like that. So you got to stop them. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. There are so many people that feel like it's better to be right than to be attached to somebody. And I think a lot of people can say they have someone in their family who they don't talk to because it was better to be right. What is that? Like, where is that in the color zone?
That is such a great question. It can be in both, right? Because some of us, let me start out by saying that we have in the green zone, we're more able to access our connections and our connection system. And one of the ways to know that you are more in your own green zone, and we all have green zone living. None of us live in one place or the other, right? Like, but when we start to get activated, we travel either red or green, right? More often than not. When we're in our green zone, we can access curiosity. We're more flexible. And the key is that you can be connected to yourself and other people. But as humans, when we start to get activated and we start to feel threatened, we lose that ability to be flexible because we're just being told we're threatened and we have to act real fast. So I would say being right is usually on one side of the spectrum or the other. But to answer your question more directly, it's usually more on the blue side. Oftentimes, when we live on the red side, we have a little bit harder time connecting to ourselves and we trust other people a little too much when we're activated. And on the blue side, we've learned I can't trust other people to be there. So I got to be there for myself. And so being right makes me feel very confident and very secure. And I know what's right, and I'm going to tell you. And so it's a very blue side activation. And it's really interesting when people start to learn that's actually a sign of insecurity, right? We think when we feel secure, we are secure. But truth of the matter is, if we feel like we know the answer and we feel compelled to give it, because if people could just understand the right way, we would all be good. That means we're living, we like to call it, you're kind of living in the blue zone. And we want to help you learn how to warm your system up.
Yeah.
Being in the right, if you think you are right and everyone else is wrong, it likely means you're living in a disconnected place, and that being in relationship with somebody else's opinions and thoughts is too threatening. And so being right means I don't have to tolerate you. It means I can just push you away and like, I'm right. You either come over here and join with me and agree, or you get away from me,
And
or I'll dominate you.
you point out that that is where a lot of men fall. Boys don't
Yes.
cry, don't, that's be a man or whatever. And
Mm.
and also it's rewarded a lot.
So true.
Yeah.
Really is.
You had an example of the book of the young man that, oh, he does this. He's so, look how calm he handles these situations. And it
It's
is rewarded. And, it is in this world. I just feel like if we could get more to that green, if you could show a little bit of emotion, what that would do for the other side. And you have some great examples in the book. The couple, Mia, was it Mia
Mhm.
and DJ?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh my goodness. I mean,
Did you relate to him?
it was so, I was seeing stuff in there. I was seeing people I know. I was seeing things that probably I do. Can you share a little bit about that story of Mia and DJ?
Sure, sure. So in our book, we try to use, we don't try, we do use examples. There's not anybody specific. They're all fictional, but they're a conglomerate of individuals from ourselves and all the people we've worked with. We can relate to every character in there. There's not one character that we're describing that we can't relate to parts of it. And that's our goal, and to help you kind of walk through. So what you're bringing up is me and DJ's are a couple that are headed out for a date night, a long needed date night. And in the journey of going to the date night, there's all these things that happen that are beyond their awareness that create disconnection along the way, but they're unaware. And then date night, surprisingly, not surprisingly, ends up in a little bit of a catastrophe conflict. They went out hoping for connection. That's what they both want. And yet, because they're unaware of their own needs, the way they interpret information, they end up ending the evening in real disconnect. And it's painful. And I think we can all, we just so want to connect. And why is it we end up so far away from each other? And so what we do in the book is we walk through not only helping you understand what happens, hopefully, we eventually have them go to couples therapy. That does not mean everybody needs to go to couples therapy. That's part of the reason we wrote the book. We want it to be accessible. Not everybody can afford to, they don't have access to it. I'm obviously a psychologist. I'm a big believer in therapy, but I also know it's a real privileged thing to have out there in the world, and many people don't. And even if they do, oftentimes, like DJ and here in this book is not real prone to want to walk in and talk about his problems to a therapist. So we do walk them through going to therapy. Part of my journey in that, our journey in that, was to help people understand how positive it could be and how safe it can be. But it's also, as DJ, and you're right, more men lean blue, although we have plenty of women. We're growing more blues, to be honest with you. We're growing more people because of the disconnect, the reliance on, we're moving away from the reliance on relationships and the more on information. And when we are focused on information and not relational connection, our wiring starts to change and we become less and less emotionally available and connected. But the truth is, our body know better. Our bodies know that we need people. So what that does is it leaves us all more in a state of alarm, whether we know it or not. So we become more reactive, more defensive, and, as we see in many parts of the world, more polarized and in our own camps rather than connecting. And we really see a pattern of going further that way. And that's why we're really trying to focus on secure relating, like finding your own grounded self right now so that you can have better relationships in your own home, with your neighbors, but also we like to say with your favorite and least favorite people.
Well, you talk about the 3 R's and we kind of touched on it. We touched on recognizing and we touched on reflection, rewiring, which is what you just kind of introduced, I think is kind of the next conversation. How can we rewire and open up to deeper connections and attachments with people?
So rewiring can happen at a moment to moment basis, right? It is, and as we rewire, as we have different interactions, we start to build different wiring. As somebody, if you think about it, as somebody becomes, I see this with couples all the time, they might come in and they're just at each other. And oftentimes people wait too long to go get help. And their bodies have developed a bunch of beliefs and automatic reactivity, because we continue to develop our nervous system, and couples and parents and children can develop patterns that impact their wiring for the good, and they can develop really entrenched negative patterns that start to impact. And when I say, how our body continues to get wired is that where we place our attention, what assumptions we make, what internal dialogue we have and narrative we continue to believe. Our body is a learning machine. It continues to learn. Oh, every time you see this person, they're threatening. Okay, now when I see you, my body starts to respond and starts to build wiring to believe this person's a threat. And what's so painful is that oftentimes people can do that to one another. They can do it with the uncle at the family gathering who's always in the right and shutting people down. The minute you start to see your uncle, your nervous system shuts down, and then you can start to devalue them and distance and lose the relationship. How we can rewire in an everyday way is, if I can securely relate to myself, I really, really can change the dialogue, even with that uncle or aunt. And how that can really change our wiring is not just that we're shifting the relationship, we're shifting our belief in ourselves. And so our whole body goes, oh, wait, because I'm able to do this differently, and because I'm able to calm down, I kind of trust my body more. And if I can trust my body more, maybe I don't have to stay in this more alert state, which happens underneath the surface. And so as my body calms down, guess what I do? I start to interact more caringly and lovingly to people around me. And through co-regulation, we like to call it like the co-wiring, then other people will immediately, and it really works. I can promise you that when you start to have more curiosity instead of the answers, and you're able to go, it's really interesting you have that opinion. I find it really interesting. I'll be honest, I can feel my body. It feels challenging. I feel challenged by your perspective. So I'm curious, can you tell me how you got there? Why is it that you believe A, B, and C? What got you there? You've just become a safer person inside yourself because you've acknowledged that you felt challenged. And then you became a safer person to them. And then the irony is they have to go inside themselves. When you don't say you're wrong and you say, how did you get there? Tell me more. And you're really interested. You can't trick the nervous system. You have to find your own curiosity. But when you find curiosity, you will feel the conversation shift to a deeper level. And now what we're really talking about is probably pretty similar stuff. We all want safety and caring and safety in our schools. We all we have a lot in common. And when we can connect with what we have in common, we do shift our wiring. And the beautiful thing is we really will shift the wiring of people around us. It has a triple effect, it has a trickling down effect.
Do you find that when people get to that point, when they've rewired, does that not only affect your mind and your body, but your health? Like, have you found that that helps in like just your illnesses or anything like that?
Tremendously, tremendously. Because of the culture, there's not a coincidence that women tend to outlive men because they rely on relationships more. We kind of trust that relationships are going to be vital. Men, and it's painful because men deserve better. This is not an anti-men message. Men deserve better. We deserve to shift that message to them and say, your emotions are welcomed. We want you. We're here if you cry. But you're right, it really affects our health because going back to what I mentioned earlier, our body deeply knows that we need people. Even if our mind has said, I don't need people, I'm happier alone. In fact, now that the pandemic is hit and I get to stay home a lot more and I don't have to interact with anybody, phew, right? That's great news. It isn't great news because even if you're not aware, consciously aware you need people, your body is. So your body really will activate into a higher state of alarm system, whether you feel it, and it impacts how we digest our food. It impacts how we engage with people. It impacts our heart conditions. And that's what happens when we're alone or lonely. Our body does wither. It's just like I kind of liken it sometimes because people can understand the idea of food, right? We all know we need food to eat to survive. But if we are deprived of the access of food, we could lose our hunger. Actually, our appetite starts to cut off more and more and more. And our brain doesn't tell us we're hungry anymore, but our body knows it is. And so it starts to deteriorate. There's a very similar reaction to emotions. If we cut off and we get so logical, we have everything delivered to our front door, so we never have to go to a grocery store and really smile at a clerk and connect, then our body learns, oh, you're not going to access people. I'm going to cut that part of your system off, and I'm going to really amplify the part of your brain that needs logic. And I think we all need to be really careful of that because it's really is deteriorating our health. It's not always what we think is deteriorating our health. Relationships are key. Connection is key. I'd like to say actually connection.
Is that what you hope that people get from the book? That connection is key. Like, why write this book, and what do you hope that people get from it?
That might be my most favorite question I've heard in a long time. We wrote this book very much for that I don't think it's not true. We've had a lot of evolution of a lot of pain in our world. So when we say today's the most painful, it's not actually really true. But in my conscious life, right? In my conscious awareness, this has probably been the most divisive, destructive time period. And I and my co-author, Sue Marriott, are both concerned, as many of us are, that if we keep going on that direction, it's going to be really hard to come back from it. And we feel that we're incited in a lot of ways to be in our activated selves. We're incited by social media, telling you that you're doing it wrong, you need to do it different, by the news, who is always getting our attention by proclaiming fear of everything, by trying to find our tribes by dividing and believing that our tribe's right and your tribe's wrong. So right now, we're really concerned with the kind of disconnection, and the promotion that I think is happening by many people out there to say, you should be in fear and hate other people and come join me. And the problem with that is it works if you're not aware, because we all need to feel like somebody knows better than us. And if somebody can tell us easy solutions, come to me, I'll fix it. We don't have to think very hard for ourselves. Then we kind of stay divided. And our desire of our book has nothing to do with politics. It has to do with all of us being responsible for grounding ourselves, finding our wise selves, and being able to reach each other in a more connected way. And honestly, to care about people we'll never meet that are across the globe, and to not fraction off and say we're all one big community, and we have to think of each other that way. And we really feel like part of the answer is learning how to securely relate ourselves, but also expect our leaders to do it.
Absolutely.
We need our leaders, whoever they are, to be securely relating with those on the other side, right? We need hope, and we need people to bridge us, not divide us.
Wow. And when does the book come out?
The book comes out April 30th of this year.
April 30th. Okay,
Yes, I'm
April
really
30th.
excited.
Well, make sure that you check out this book, Secure Relating, Holding Your Own in an Insecure World, and also check out their podcast. It's the Therapist Uncensored podcast, and we are so thankful that you came to talk to us today, Anne, and we really
thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you, and
so
best of
much.
luck with the book.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. It was just a joy to be here to talk with you all.